Hello! Welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and today's guest is Rick Alexander. Rick is an author, he's a speaker, he is the Chief Growth Operator for the Special Forces Experience. This dude spent 12 years in the United States Navy. He worked as a Special Operations Combat Medic. He also ran 240 miles with body armor to raise money for charity. And in this episode, we talk all about adversity, meaning, growth mindset, how doing things that are difficult and challenging help you to identify who you truly are and what you truly desire. We talk about meditation as well. It's a good conversation, and he tells a couple crazy stories that are surely going to entertain and impress you. Wild times. But I really do think you're going to like this guy. He's got a podcast. He has a new book out called Ambitious Heroes and Heartache. And it's a good chat. You're going to dig it. So without further ado, Rick Alexander. This episode is brought to you by Cured Nutrition. Cured is the leader in CBD supplementation with an entire line of products designed to take your everyday life to its ultimate potential. Their daily staples are formulated with an in-house clinical herbalist, which has taken the traditional CBD regimen to an entirely new level of optimization. If you're anything like me, you like waking up feeling good and living well. You've probably toyed around with the idea of finding healthy alternatives to jumpstart your morning. Personally, it's why I start my day with Cured Rise, which is their focus supplement. It's a powerhouse blend of functional mushrooms like lion's mane and cordyceps, broad-spectrum CBD, and powerful adaptogens. It gives me clean, clear, and sustained energy without any of the caffeine jitters or crash that I get with coffee. After I get going, Aura is next. It's another blend of functional mushrooms, CBD, and adaptogens, but it's got a twist. We all know how important it is to sustain our immunity nowadays, and this covers all of my bases. The vitamin D, prebiotics, crucial antioxidants are delivered straight to the gut, which is the foundation of our emotional and physical health. Am I right? Second brain. It's where the majority of our serotonin production and immune function begin, or it keeps everything in check, performing at its best, so I have one less thing to worry about, and I obviously cannot forget Zen. I use it every night. It is certainly why it has become Cured's #1 selling relaxation and sleep product. You know the long nights spent tossing and turning? Yeah, not with this stuff. It has ingredients like reishi mushroom, ashwagandha, magnesium, passion flower, broad spectrum CBD, so thankfully, restlessness is something of the past. Cured Nutrition products are your answer for a daily dose of health. Visit curednutrition.com. That's C-U-R-E-D nutrition.com. Be sure to use the coupon code LOVEBOMBS, and at the checkout you will save 10% off your order. So, Rick Alexander, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, we were just talking a little bit before about what we're going to talk about, but before we dive in, I'm curious if you could describe yourself a little bit for those who are listening that have no idea who Rick Alexander is or what you do or what you're about. What's your deal?
Sure. Yeah, that's always my least favorite thing to do about myself is talk.
It's the lamest question to ask too, but it has to be done, right?
Right. So I'm a speaker and a writer first and foremost. I love to kind of craft content based on the experiences in life that I've had. I also work as the chief growth operator for a company called the Special Forces Experience. So I spent 12 years in special operations capacity in the military as a medic, and really, one, I found that job to be immensely satisfying, but I also spent the end of my career working training pipelines. And so I really got to experience the growth that happens in these sort of high pressure type situations. And I really got good at manipulating variables in order to create these growth experiences. And so, yeah, I really spent a lot of time sort of walking into adversity and writing about it and synthesizing it and thinking about it. And so that's been the crux of my work for the last few years.
Yeah. And so when you say that you got really good at manipulating variables to create a growth experience, I picture you as like a evil puppet master of sorts, of like, got to make this harder and got to tweak this dial a little bit. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's like almost exactly right. Yeah, like if you watch any of the sort of like I was a buds instructor for a bit, and so if you watch these videos of these selection type training, and the instructors are like irate or yelling or kind of going flying off the handle, something worth considering is that it's actually there's a point to all of it, and if you can really understand what the point is, you figure out how to apply pressure on the psyche in the right place in order to force growth experiences. And we were talking before the show, there's all these like paramilitary organizations out there that offer these selection type processes, and essentially people pay a lot of money to go get the shit kicked out of them. And so you've got to ask, like, why is that, right? And so yeah, I've really made it my work to figure out why that is and get acutely good at doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to dive into that a little bit more in depth. And so you said buds, maybe for those who have no idea what buds is or what special operations is, could you provide a little bit of a primer and then we can start to unpack it?
Sure. Okay. So buds stands for Basic Underwater Demolition or SEAL School. In the Navy, there are two forms of special operations. So there's SEAL, and then there's another form called SWCC. And so we go through a combined orientation program, and then they break off, and you go through your own sort of. It's a selection process. It's more adapted to the job that you're going to do. So I did that. I was SWCC, and then after a deployment of that, I actually went over to the Army. We have like a program you can do, and I went through the Green Beret medic course. And so Army Green Beret, it's like the Army Special Forces brand of the Army. And essentially, in any kind of special operations capacity, you work in really small teams, and you tend to work in really austere environments, and you are used for something like a Swiss Army knife. You're used for jobs that are hard to get to with like big groups of infantry and stuff. So, in my career, I went to 57 different countries. I trained other special forces from around the world. So I had a really cool experience seeing parts of the military that like you really wouldn't get to see in any other way, shape or form.
Mm. Are you kind of like those, like you'll hear a news article of like 3 SEALs killed in random country I've never heard of in years. Like what the heck was going on there?
Yep.
Thing.
Sure. Yeah. Because you're so small, the country can use you in ways that they just can't use a really big force,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were in 57 different countries.
Totally. Yeah.
Doing special operations missions, working as a medic. Mm-hmm. So tell me a story. I don't know. Like there's got to be so much to that, right? I mean, what was that like? I've never met somebody who has been able to say that sentence about their life.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. So it's a lot of training. I'll be honest. Like the special forces are used in training capacities a lot. So like what that looks like is we go live with another special forces from another country, and we train them and like live with them. And so there's a lot of focus on learning foreign languages and really integrating in cultures, which is a really cool aspect of it. And because I was a medic and because I was a special operations trained medic, I actually could go into any country and then I would just sell myself because everybody always needs medics. And so I wasn't really stuck to who I deployed with. I'd go there and I'd be like, hey, I'm a medic and I'm bored if I had nothing going on. And like, I'd get to go on all of these other sort of crazy missions like out in the world. So I do have a good story if you want it.
No, it's fine. Okay. Like this is not the time. No, of course, man.
Okay. In my first book, Burn Your Couch, I read about this. But so this is interesting. So first of all, something to know about special operations is that, a huge percentage of people try to get through and a very small percentage actually finish. So in my class, we started with 76 dudes and we graduated 14 originals. It's just something worth considering, like the attrition rate. So I am deployed to Africa. This is actually my final deployment. And I'm laying in my hut at night, and there's not really anything going on. We're not like, there's not fighting or anything. We're there on a training mission. And this girl like knocks on my door. It's like midnight or something. And I took a bunch of sleeping pills. So I'm like super out of it. She keeps pounding on my door. So I like kind of stagger out, and she's like kind of beside herself. And she's like, there was a plane crash and we need medics. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I'm like trying to like, world is starting to whirl, and I'm like taking stock, like, okay, well, she's like, we'll come around with the truck. So I like run in, grab my med bag. So I'm wearing like cutoff shorts, a hoodie, like what I would sleep in, right? Just like throw a hoodie on with cutoff shorts, and grab my med bag and like a huge fire extinguisher. Cause I'm like, I heard there was a plane crash, so maybe I'll need that, We get to the airstrip, and they're like, it's not here. You got to go further. I'm like, man, what's going on? And I'm like talking to the people in the truck. So there's a couple other medics that were around base with me, not in the special forces capacity, just kind of sort of like regular military medics, one from the Army, one from the Navy. And then we had a Kenyan Air Force guy with us as well. So we're like kind of deducing what happened. Well, a Kenyan Air Force plane crashes, like completely goes down. And we get to the airstrip. They're like, it's not here, it's further. So then we go further down the road. We end up getting to a field where there's a bunch of abandoned cars. And there's another Kenyan guy, and he's like, hey, you got to go in further. You got to go in further. And we're like, man, okay. So we don't have anything on me. Like I have no gear except my med bag. So we start into the African jungle at like maybe 1 a.m. And the African jungle, you have to low crawl after a point, because the trees grow up about 3 feet, but then they grow across. And there's like, it's real thick. And so this goes on. We realize we don't have any communication. And so what's happening is the one Kenyan guy that's with us thinks he knows where it is. And so he's just yelling into the night, hoping the night will like yell back, right? Like somebody would be there. And then the only other thing is I had a radio to a plane overhead. And so I would just be like, what would happen is they would try to vector us into the crash site. So we'd be crawling for a while, and then they'd fly overhead, and we'd like turn left, and then we'd crawl for a while, and then they'd fly right, and we'd like turn right and crawl for a while. So this deteriorates into us being like fully lost by like 4 a.m. I'm like, okay, so if they're survivors, they're not survivors. My med bag keeps getting ripped open by like the pucker brush. So I've lost a ton of med equipment in the night, I'm also dragging this fire extinguisher. The two people around me start falling apart. Like the dude starts praying, and he's like, Rick, I know you're not religious, man, but I'm gonna pray for you too. And I'm like, that's fine, but like, we got to get out of here. The girl just really just breaks down, full on crying. And I had this interesting moment where it just hit me that, you arrive at these points in life and you never get to go back and get more prepared. You never go to get more training. You can never go back and get more psychologically flexible. Whatever it is that you've brought with you up until this moment is what you get. And I had thought that selection prior to that was so stupid, like the yelling and like the trying to make you quit. And I was just like, it's a big game. This is all dumb. I'm going to do it to pass, but like, I don't care. And it hit me in that moment how important the way that we prepare for our life actually is, because there was two people, like grown adults, fully breaking down. And of course, like we're in Africa, so it's the jungle. There was a Kenyan Air Force guy had gotten attacked like by a lion, like kind of close to that. So they had all these memories and stuff. So their psyche is really running away on them is what's happening. And plus they're overwhelmed by the chaos of not knowing where we are and getting more and more lost. And I had this moment of realizing like, this is a shit show, but it's fine. Like, I'm okay. I know how to, like, we're going to be okay. And so just this moment of realizing like how prepared I was, I don't know, it really highlighted the fact of how important prior work and like taking, learning to grow from the adverse experiences that we go through actually are. We ended up finding the plane crash. I never tell the end of the story, which is why I'm telling it right now. But we ended up finding a plane crash, and one person was alive because he could maintain his own airway. Basically, he crawled against a tree, had like 85% burns on his body, but his airway was fine. So we get him on a litter from the plane, like a makeshift litter, and low crawl drag him like 3 hours out of there to a medevac. It was wild. So that's how the story ended. But yeah, so there's a story.
Did that dude survive?
Man, this is why I don't tell the story. We had him stable. He died of an infection in a Nairobi hospital, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sorry I asked that question.
Oh,
so I mean, that's just one of I'm sure countless stories that you have in your experience. I mean, you just described that's a fucking crazy story that you just lived like, oh yeah, that was a shit show. And so I guess where I'm going with that is I imagine that there are other examples of that in a 12-year special operations career.
Mm-hmm.
And then you left that career, and I'm curious what that was like. I'm sure there was some kind of a transition phase. I'm sure there was anxiety or fear around the next chapter or how to make that decision. I imagine there was a lot of emotional release and grief and processing of all the shit that you just lived through. Like, what was that little transition phase like for you?
Yeah. So if I'm being completely honest, the first time I wanted to get out, I started noticing through my career that I had a shifting value system, and that like maybe my values weren't super in line with the work in the world that I was doing anymore, though it was a cool adventure and certainly not one I would regret. I was also getting to the point where I was like, I think I'm done. And, the other thing is too, is there becomes a point where it's sort of like, you're not growing anymore. You're kind of on autopilot. You're doing the same job. And so the most comfortable thing I could do in the world was just keep taking money every 2 weeks is what it felt like. But, I did have a lot of fear, and I re-enlisted because I had so much fear because, you ask people for advice of what you should do when you get out. And it's like, everyone's like, you shouldn't get out. You should stay in where you have comfort. You have the pension, you've got the benefits, all the things that people think matter in life. And, it took me from the time I re-enlisted, it took me 12 days to regret that decision. And it was a really immensely valuable lesson because one thing I found in that process is like, we all sort of have this internal constitution, and the one thing that you cannot do is disobey that. Like if your soul is calling you somewhere in life, like, unfortunately you got to go, like you're being called to a more expansive existence. Like you just don't get to stay here. And so anyway, so it was sort of reconciling with that. And then, when it came time to actually, so that put me in for another 3 years, which I did in the training capacity. So, it's all stuff that was great that I could use for my life and like had a great experience, but also realizing that I really do have to listen to this voice that's kind of the deepest within me. And then came the struggle of, you get all these job offers. Like I got a job offer to just go be a medic for the State Department, like really making the same amount of money and like wouldn't have to take a hit in lifestyle at all. And then reconciling that with like, also I've been that weird kid since like 5th grade that liked to write poetry in my room. And like, how do I tell all of these people that like, not only am I getting out of this job that everyone prizes you for, especially in America, like our nationalism is so high that people like, they really have a high opinion of you and you're in the military. Some people do. Certainly my family was that way. And so then to tell them like, well, I'm going to get out and also I'm just going to figure it out as a writer. And like, that's where the real struggle for me began. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was flying years ago somewhere in the Midwest, and I had a layover in some airport somewhere. And as we were landing, the flight attendant announced like, hey, we have 2 Army soldiers on our flight. And the whole plane like stood up and clapped. Mm-hmm. And it was in that moment I was like, oh my goodness, like this is a real cultural thing. Like, I don't know anything about these 2 dudes. Like they could be assholes, they could be jerks, they could be terrible soldiers. But just the fact that they were a part of this thing, part of this unit, which like is important to national security and all the rest. But like, it struck me as this, it felt weird.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It felt weird to applaud people simply for signing up to do a thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where it's going with that story, but perhaps you relate to that in some aspect, in that you were no longer feeling aligned with what you were doing, and you had to get out, and you were like being called to write poetry and be a writer. while at the same time you were in this kind of venerated, socially approved and quasi worshipped position as a special operations officer. Mm-hmm. So what did you do? How did you navigate that?
Man, I went out in the woods and I got real quiet, if I'm being honest. I had a company, I had a supplement company. This is just backstory information, but I had a supplement company and a relationship, and like I thought my life was going in one direction. And I think sometimes the universe sort of tears things away from us that just weren't meant for us, And about 8 months before I got out, I couldn't keep up the facade anymore. And so like the company went into the dirt and the relationship ended. So before I was getting out of the military, I had like 8 months out, and like the whole life I thought I was getting out for was also gone. And a blank canvas is like at one part incredible in the opportunity of a lifetime, and one part overwhelming and sheer terror. And so I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. Other than the fact, so I started like, I got job offers, like I was talking about, got a job offer from another financial company. And I was like trying to figure out like, what is my damn value? Like, if you don't live in alignment with your value system, like your life just won't have meaning. And that's just a psychological truth. And so, I started doing work to figure out what I valued. And I went through a couple programs, coaching program type things. And one of them was, we went out in the woods for 4 days with no cell phone, and went through a bunch of kind of dream work type exercises, goal work stuff, like pretty run of the mill stuff. But I remember I'm sitting out there and I asked myself a question because I was so conflicted about taking a job I didn't want to take, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. And I was like, okay, so I asked myself the question, if I could somehow figure it out as a writer and content creator and I could make the same amount of money, which would I choose? And it was like, obviously I would go choose the thing that like I'm feeling like my soul's calling me to. So then it was the question of, okay, so then is it just courage for you? Do you not have the courage to go the direction that you want to go? And I was like, yes, I don't have the courage, having this conversation with myself. And it's like, okay, well then you need a creative angle. Like you need a plan. That's what you need. You need to figure it out. And so once I like laid it out black and white for myself like that, I knew that some part of me would never be satisfied to go against the direction of my soul. And so I came up with a plan. I built a course off of a bunch of research and material I was writing about and a bunch of coaching work I had done. And I got out, went to Australia and wrote that book. Yeah, backpacked and wrote a book.
That's fun.
Yeah. I started, I thought in my head, I'm like, I'm going to go there for a couple months and write this book. Like the book took me 2 years.
Yeah. It's always the perception when I talk to people that have not written a book and they have a desire to write the book, you could tell immediately that there is this impression in them that it's like, I'll just sit down and write a book. Mm-hmm. Like, ho hum, no big deal. It's easy. It's like writing an email. Yeah. And then you talk to people who have written a book, and it's this kind of, we talked about this before we started recording, but it's like a different level of respect and acknowledgement. It's like, you did that, like fucking right on. Proud of you.
Yeah. It's like going into the forest with an axe and being like, I'm not going to leave until I make a log cabin. Yeah. It's like, well, you don't have the right tools. It's like, I know, but I'm going to do it. Like,
I'll figure it out.
Right. Right as I got out of the military, I do some ultra endurance type stuff. And sort of like an ode to service, I did a 240-mile run while wearing body armor to raise money for this Gold Star family kind of adventure company. Anyway, so I do that. And after, a lot of people are like, what's next? And man, after now having completed the book, I was like, well, the book is next. And now after completing it, I'm like, man, that was an intellectual like feat of endurance that the 240-mile run really can't touch. I mean, they're both hard in different ways, but yeah, I to your point, writing a book, you really have to mine the contents of your soul, and then you've got to make it cohesive.
Yeah. Then you have to finish it after it's written. I've talked about that previously, where I did the Camino in Spain. So you like walk across Spain on this pilgrimage, and it's
cool.
It's far, and it's like 33 days of hiking, and it's tough. I mean, it's not easy. And I would do that in a heartbeat, no questions asked, if I had to do that or, spend time working on a thesis, like my PhD thesis again. It's like, 100%. I would walk through the pouring rain uphill in cow shit rather than sit down at a computer and stare at the screen day after day after day.
But here you are writing another book.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? Like, you would appreciate that. It's like,
I do.
But I think it touches on what you said earlier about once you have this epiphany or once you realize what your soul is being called to do, I think when you cultivate that knowing, there's this kind of annoyance of like, no, that's so hard. No, you try to talk yourself out of it. And it's like, no, the soul knows what it wants to know. And it knows the path. As an example, last night, my girlfriend and I watched a documentary on YouTube about the Pacific Crest Trail. Are you familiar with that? It's like from Mexico up to Canada. And I felt this little soul seed being like, we should do this. And in my brain, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And then my girlfriend's all excited about it. I'm like, no. But then part of me is like, this is cool. This feels exciting.
Right.
It's that same vibe. But hang on, you very flippantly touched on this idea that you did a 240-mile race wearing body armor.
Yeah, run. Yep.
So I'm going to need to know a lot more about that.
Yeah. So, it was interesting, man. It was, I ran from Fort Bragg, which is where I went through a medic course in the Army, to Virginia Beach, which was like my final duty station. So they call them Gold Star families whenever a service member is like lost overseas. And so this company takes these kids who are part of Gold Star families who have lost their parents, and they bring them on adventures and like bring them out into the world like, a parent would do. Something that like really moved me, and having lost friends and things, it like really spoke to me. And so, I raised money. I can't remember. I think we raised like $7,000 or $8,000 for them, which was cool. Like that sent a bunch of kids on adventures. And it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. Like, the thing that I didn't realize is like, I could have raised the same amount of money just by running 100 miles with no body armor and just talking about it. And the thing about doing 240 in 30 pounds of kit was like, nobody could fathom how they couldn't fathom the difference between 100 miles and 240. Like, we don't really have a lot of reference for what goes on in those final 140, and it was interesting. I went through like a full ego death out there. Like, I mean, it was a really intense experience psychologically. Yeah. And the whole thing took me 104 hours.
Yeah. I want to hear more about this, but just if you're listening for our metric loving friends, it's like essentially 9 marathons, more or less, 8 or 9 marathons that you're talking about. And you ran that in one go? Like, yeah. So you started and then didn't stop until you had run 200.
I stopped to sleep for 20 minutes 3 different times. So, yeah.
I mean, like, do you acknowledge what a ridiculous thing that is that you've done? Like, in the best way? Like, to say, I stopped and slept 3 times for 20 minutes each. Why not 40 minutes?
Right. I don't know. But what I'll say is, like, I really like am not a plan guy, which is crazy because in the military, everyone thinks like you're the guy with like I had no plan. And in fact, I really dig adventures with no plan. And so I just put it, like, I went to Fort Bragg and I literally just put it in my GPS, Virginia Beach. And then I just started running. So it brought me down all these crazy places, and like actually got held up at gunpoint one night. I had a whole bunch of crazy adventures, which for people that want to like relive it, I put a story in my, on my Instagram, so you can like go watch it. But yeah, went through a whole bunch of wild stuff like that.
Why did you not plan it like at all? I mean,
I looked at the route on Google Maps, right? And I like had a bunch of food.
Was that just like an egoic decision, or was it a conscious decision, or was it like I could do it, it's all good, no big deal? Like,
No, it wasn't that as much as it was like wanting to put my back against the wall in very specific ways. And so, like, as an example, I had a crew, right? And so, um, I really relied, I had done a lot of, like, I did a 205-mile run before in the mountains of Tahoe. And so I knew where I would struggle. And so I like built the event to take away the things that I relied on to get through. So aid stations was something I relied on to get through heavily. So I was like, okay, let's make an event with no aid stations. And then the next year I rode my bike from Maine to North Carolina in the middle of winter, like in December. And when I did it with no crew because I realized on the 240-mile run how much I had used the crew and like really relied on them for my mental well-being. So it was more of designing an event specifically that would test me in like a really tough way.
And how was the experience of running 240 miles with it? Because I read that on your website, and then it said with a 30-pound vest, and in my brain I was like, oh come, like what the fuck, like and a 30-mile vest, like
yeah,
this guy. So what was it like? What did it teach you?
Geez, I probably should have like reread my journal, but yeah, let me think. I don't know. You know, one thing that was very interesting is I didn't account for how difficult the vest was actually going to be because it's like every stride then becomes a mini squat, like a tiny squat, right? But it's a little bit more than a stride. And so I would go through times where like I couldn't lift my arms. I would go through times where I was like peeing like straight rhabdo. I was like peeing like just straight motor oil. Somehow I got out of that, which was wild. And then like a bunch of crazy stuff happened, like getting held up at gunpoint one night in Hampton, Virginia and stuff like that. But then contrasting that with these like incredible experiences of the sun coming up over the fields and just feeling like, wow, I get to be a part of this kind of. So yeah, it was like you got to do the full gamut of human experience. And I'll tell you one thing that was cool about it. I think it was the third day. So I was like, about to make my way back into Virginia. And once you get into Virginia, it was actually pretty short. So most of the run was in North Carolina. And I hated my life. Like I was in the military and I didn't want to be anymore, you know? And I was like, for anybody that has grown resentful, you know, that's a seed that you'll never satiate, you know, it'll just keep growing. And so I was really resentful of like my lot in life and where I had put myself and everything. So I lost cell phone reception for a better part of that day. And as I crossed back into Virginia, let me see, the night before I got really, I was hallucinating and I ended up running the wrong direction for a super long way. And then I ended up having to sleep in a truck stop. Okay. So then the next morning I get up, collect my stuff, and I'm starting to run and I only slept 20 minutes. So I feel like I'm put together, like with all the wrong parts, you know, like my legs are barely moving. And as the sun comes up, I like break into a stride and then I see the sign for Virginia coming up and then my cell phone gets reception and I get like just tons of messages of people being like cheering for me and donating. And like, it just brings my spirit up. And I have this moment of realizing how excited I am to go back to this place that I had convinced myself that I hated. And I had this moment where it was as if my ego had split apart. And I was like, I cannot wait to get back there. And then I like had this moment where it felt as if I looked at my shadow self and I was like, you know, you're not coming, right? And it was like I left all of that resentment that I had learned over the years right in that spot, and it just stopped, and I just kept running. Wild experience, but broke to a lot of liberation. Yeah.
And did it actually work? Like, did you leave that part of you behind when you returned home?
Totally. I mean, you know, the thing about shadow work and stuff is these things always creep back in, and you're never there. It's not like I was self-actualized, right? But no, yeah, that you're right. It stayed there and I got back in like a completely different place. And it felt like it was, as if I had been carrying weight for my entire life, like much what you would get in like an ayahuasca experience. It felt like I was carrying weight my whole life I didn't know about. And I got the opportunity to put it down.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty accurate metaphor for what you were doing. You literally put on extra weight that you did not need to carry and ran 240 miles, right?
Yeah.
Like, just to see what happened. And then at the end of that race, you took it off, left it behind, and then walked forward just with what you needed.
Totally. And what's fascinating about those experiences, which I really didn't know at the time, is you really can mimic your psychological disposition in the world with physical adversity. Like, as long as you can mine it for the right lessons, a lot of times people go through really tough things and they think, let me just cut myself off from my body. Let me just like go into Western culture hustle mode. I'll just go. It's like, yeah, or you can realize that this is probably going to give you lessons for every single other thing that you do in your life. And so we always have this idea of when you're going through hell, keep going. And it's like, yeah, maybe, or maybe stop, look around, find out what got you there so that you don't hit the roundabout on your way out and end up back here in 2 years.
Right. Maybe take a 20-minute nap.
Right. Maybe all you need.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. The way that I've described it is like I do these cold showers in the morning, and I hate cold showers, and they're never fun. Mm-hmm. But I do them not because of the shower, but because of the lessons that it teaches me about being uncomfortable and choosing to consciously do something that's uncomfortable, right? And then it relates to relationships, it relates to work and writing and all the rest of it. It's like a hack of sorts, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like building the internal authority that teaches you that you can do hard things, right?
Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you, though, as somebody who has done a tremendous amount of hard things, somebody who is like an expert in it, you could argue, like, what is your philosophy around adversity? Like, how do you approach difficult times or the voices in your head, et cetera?
Well, I think one thing is that there's an immense amount of wisdom in pain. Like I was just saying, stop and look around and figure out like what got me here, right? I think really owning the ways in which you've contributed to the situation that you're in is super important. And so pain can bring an immense amount of wisdom if in fact you can create some objectivity around it. If you are your pain, if it's swallowing your ego and your internal authority, you can't really learn from that. You have to actually create some psychological objectivity so that you can assess it and start to learn from it. And so I think that's really important. Another thing I think too, though, is we have this idea in Western culture of like, you can't change me, that like obstinate attitude. And actually, I think your life is trying to change you for the better. And so actually, I don't think resilience is resisting change. I think it's about learning to flow with change, right? And when you do that, there's a natural transformation that happens from within you. It's not like transformation to me isn't this idea that you do a bunch of growth work and then you arrive there. It's actually that you learn to get out of the way and allow what's trying to change within you actually take place. And so approaching life as if it has something to teach you, I think that's the first thing, right? Because a lot of us go through hard things and we say, I just need to get through this. And I do the same thing. I'm going through like a difficult time in school right now. And I'm like, oh, just get through this. And then unfortunately, because how you do one thing is how you do everything, your entire life turns into, oh, let me just get through this. And so I really think it's about the manner in which you approach these things in the first place.
I love that. I think too, there's this other side of what you've described when there's a focus of just getting through it, just getting past it, finishing. There's like this avoidance that's happening of your present experience, right? And there's this kind of outsourcing of power, this outsourcing of like the lessons learned, and you're sort of, I guess you're in a roundabout way missing what life's all about if you're not present to the suck, so to speak, of like, oh no, this is how it is. Like, feel it, let it in, marinate in the suck. Like, don't get through it, but like, just let it mold you. What can it teach you? Right.
Right. Because what we do is we cling to what's good and we reject what's bad. And so we inevitably find ourselves, you create a category for good, you inadvertently create a category for bad. So you're like, I want to be here and I don't want to be there. It's like, well, your life is going to be both. assuredly. And
Yeah.
feeling broken is, or feeling whole is going to be just as incomplete as feeling broken. And so you're going to go through both. And I think it's the recognition that I think deep down we all crave wholeness. And I think that's why, religious charlatans and marketers can take advantage of the fact that you don't feel complete. And so they're like, oh, you need this to feel complete. I think that what you actually have to do is surrender to all of your life, though. I think we're trying to live fragmented lives and hoping that that gets us toward wholeness. And it's, as you said, a matter of actually just accepting all that your life is trying to offer you. And I totally appreciate that that's way easier said than done. But I think that's the work, right? There's nowhere to get in this life. And people that live as if there is always end up on the hedonic treadmill.
Yeah. Yeah. I often hear this from clients or Instagram messages and things. It's like, oh, something happened and I feel blank and I don't know what to do. So like my boyfriend left me and I feel terrible and I don't know what to do. And I usually just write back, feel terrible.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, don't overthink it. It's supposed to
You're doing
suck.
the human thing now.
Your boyfriend left you. That's really hard. That's going to feel terrible. Like you're doing it right.
Totally.
And I think that relates to what you just said there, which is, it's about wholeness rather than happiness, right? It's like you've got to take the full spectrum and try to be okay with being that.
Right.
Do you have any how do you do that? Like, what is the self-talk that you use?
Yeah, I think that it's really a matter of, as I said, like I'm going through a tough time in school right now, a ton of essays due and midterms and all this. And I find myself falling into this, like, just cut it off and just do it, whatever. And then having the talk with myself of like, but is that the life that you want? Like, do you want this life of just do it? Or do you want to be the kind of person that tries to appreciate where you are? So I dialogue with things. This is something I got from my fiance, Danielle McGinnis, who she's studying depth psychology. And there's an idea in there that your personality has all of these different personas within it. Like there's a million different versions of you, which most people can understand. But one thing that's interesting is I'm starting to dialogue with those parts of myself. So the tyrannical part of myself that's like always bashing me for falling short of my own ideal. I'm like, well, I'll start to dialogue with it in journaling practices. And like, what do you want? Like, what's the end state here? Where's this all going? And then back and forth, you realize how many parts of your life aren't really, you can fear them, or you can understand them. And if you start to understand them, it starts to release some of the power that they have over you. So that's been a huge practice of mine lately. Yeah,
I love that. I remember you just reminded me of this story when I was doing my thesis and I was having a hard time and I was in the cubicle and I, was really burnt out and hated my life and stuff. One of these guys that I work with, this professor, was like, he said something like, don't forget you used to dream about this. I was like, oh shit, you just fucked me up there. Of like, I dreamed about doing my PhD. I dreamed about writing a thesis. I dreamed about having a cubicle in this government building. Like I dreamed about it. What I forgot was just the other stuff that goes with it, which is the monotony and the boredom and the frustration. It's like a package deal that I failed to visualize at the time. Right. And so the same for you. It's like you dreamed about doing a master's program. It's like, oh yeah, well, that means you have to write a bunch of papers and, get stressed out.
Totally. But we live with this like Peter Pan syndrome, right? Where it's like, we're in perpetual fantasy. And like when our life actually comes calling and demanding that we do the work, it's like, the fantasy was great.
Yeah. It's like, oh no, it's not supposed to be like this. It's supposed to be like my fantasy world.
Right.
I know better than the universe how my life is supposed to be. Like, oh, this master's degree is supposed to be super easy. That's why everybody has one. No, oh, they don't. Shit. Yeah, I see it. Same with the special forces stuff, I imagine. It's like there are levels to growth, and you need to put in that amount of effort if you want to obtain the thing that few people obtain, right?
Yeah, totally. And then I think there's a process too of just letting go of your expectations, right? Because you have these expectations of what it's going to be like. And when you do that, you give life about a billion ways to let you down and only one way to satisfy you. And like life didn't agree to your terms. And so now you've put yourself in a situation in which you're suffering because of yourself, because of what you wanted.
Yeah, just unnecessarily, right?
Unnecessarily, right.
Do you have, you mentioned journaling. Do you have other kind of practices or rituals that you use to like optimize your life or to become a better human?
I meditate a lot. I know that if people don't meditate, then I know the struggle of like trying to become someone that meditates, because that struggle was real for me for a long time. And I think that like Headspace and some of the guided meditations can certainly help push you through that. But no, I spend a lot of time in meditation and prayer every day. I journal and I walk a lot too. I mean, I walk a ton, like sit down and read or write, but then I always walk to process afterward.
And so just to clarify, when you say you walk a ton or that you do a lot of meditation, like approximately what does that look like?
It looks like it's flowing with my life depending on the demands, but I mean, I walk, legit between 7 and 10 miles every day. Because I essentially just can't keep my mind going any other way. Like, I don't know if you found that in your doctoral program, but like I can only think really hard for about 2 or 3 hours, and then I've got to like get some space. So my day looks like me like doing a lot of intellectually rigorous work, but then walking and just like listening to Alan Watts and not doing, just kind of like letting my mind just go back into that fantasy place. And then I meditate quite a bit too. I mean, a good hour every day. Yeah.
Like in the morning, in the evening?
In the morning, yeah. I've never been a morning routine person. I don't like to be the kind of person that recommends them because, again, when I didn't have one and I'd hear people about these lengthy morning routines, I would just be like, that sounds stupid. But it really does anchor my day. And so every single morning I do what's called morning pages, which is like 3 pages of free flow journaling, stream of consciousness style. And then, I pick some wisdom text and I'll read it and do like a spiritual reading. And then I meditate for about an hour. Yeah. And then I start my day.
Do you do a guided meditation, or are you sitting in silence or with an intention? Or?
Yeah, that's why I always will read like some wisdom text, and I'll end up just sort of letting my soul kind of guide me and find either a verse or a passage or something. And I practice letting go. Like I practice letting go of thoughts, because what happens is you read something and then you've got all kinds of opinions about it, which are probably not that great. And so the first 30 minutes is always really tough as I'm letting go of all of the thoughts that are coming in response to this. And if I can't let them go, like if I can't seem to clear my mind, I'll go back to the journal and I'll write all the things I'm letting go. And that seems to help. And then I meditate on the wisdom text. Yeah, because we really prize knowledge in our society, which is like something like contextual intelligence, but we don't prize wisdom whatsoever. And so it's just something that I found amazingly, like all these texts are written thousands of years ago and are directly relevant to the human things we're struggling with today. So
how do you differentiate knowledge and wisdom?
I think that knowledge is, again, contextual, right? So it's set within a certain amount of certain parameters. It's like you understand things within a parameters. IQ is a good way to measure that. And then wisdom has this discerning element. It's like it doesn't matter where it's put. You can discern what needs to happen within the context of what you're doing. And so wisdom feels like the echo of what's always been true, whereas like intelligence or knowledge seems to be true for what we're talking about right now in this moment.
Hang on, you need to repeat that line. Wisdom seems like the echo of what's always been true?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me.
You should write that down and put your name on that. Is that yours?
Yeah, that is mine, yeah.
That's good, man. I always, if you were my girlfriend and we were going for a walk, and I often do this with her, I'll be like, you have a week to use that line or else I'm putting my name on it and you're going to see it on Instagram. Like,
okay. I'll put it on Instagram.
No, I love that. Because some of the dumbest people I've met have PhDs, for example. Like they're very smart. they know everything about this particular niche in life, and they can't hold a conversation. Like, it's like pulling teeth, trying to get like, how do you feel? It's like, what? I don't feel anything. All right. So
Right.
there's this distinguishing element between kind of knowing something and then applying it in a utilitarian manner with which, in the ways that you live your life. Right.
Totally. And I think that's discernment. I think that
Right.
that's the element that you need there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that it's the echo of what's always been true.
Right.
Is the way that I've described it before.
Well, truth is an interesting thing, right? Because I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it doesn't end. I sat down to write a book on truth, and I did it for about 2 months, and I was like, we're done with this. But it's important to understand that like what's emerging as the truth in culture isn't always necessarily what's always been true. And I think we tend to look at ancient people and we think, man, we're so much better than them because of all of our technology. But they were tapped into their humanity in a way that I think we're not necessarily. And so, yeah, just recognizing that people have been cracking away at this human thing for a super long time. Yeah. And the world hasn't always been the way it is now. And so to just pull from there, to try to just discern the underlying patterns of reality, which is pretty much what wisdom's echoing. I think that's what's true. And that's what, if you could live in alignment with that, you'd find that the clutter from today's, garbage political climate and all of that you can get through all of it.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits of meditation is simply cultivating an awareness. This idea of, be still and listen to God is the way I've heard it described. It's like, get still, let everything just wash off of you. All the superfluous excess, the distraction, like what actually matters to you in your life in this moment, but also day to day. Right. And it's a way that I've found to be really helpful in terms of sort of developing that discernment. Like, oh my God, that doesn't matter at all. And this other thing that really does matter, I've been neglecting, I've been taking for granted, I haven't been appreciating, right? And so I think that's a powerful one. And then I was curious, when you go for your 7 to 10 mile walks, do you have like a particular loop that you do? Do you have a intention to listen to a podcast, or are you just like, I got to move, I'm going?
Yeah, Colorado is wonderful in that a lot of the suburban areas are connected by what's called open spaces, and they're like these trail systems. And you can really go anywhere just jumping from open space to open space. And so we have one next to our house, which is like a 3-mile loop. And so I'll walk that like 3 or 4 times a day. Essentially what I do. Yeah. And so sometimes I listen to podcasts or audiobooks, and then other times I'm like, I really need to just listen to the birds and like shut up and, not put nothing else is fitting inside here. So I need because I think people have this idea of meditation that it's got to be sitting on your mat. And I think that that's great, but I think it's great to also, you can walk and meditate for sure.
Yeah. I remember I was in Bali a couple of years ago and talking to this very mystical, psychic, palm reading woman, and I asked her about meditation, and I was like, "What? Like, when do you meditate?" And she just kind of smiled, that wise smile, and was like, "All the time." Mm-hmm. It's like, you clever woman.
Yeah, and something too that's really great is you'd asked me like about going through adversity, and I talked about creating objectivity, and that is what meditation gives you. You can imagine that most people think that they are their thoughts. That's why we say, I am angry. And what meditation does is it allows you to pull your awareness behind the thought pattern and actually just look at it. And that's the thing that got me really into meditating. I had been cracking away at it like for 4 months or something. I woke up in a bad mood, and I was out to lunch, and I was like just projecting my bad mood on my friends, and I realized it, right? Like I had the full recognition of like asking myself, like, what's going on with you right now, man? Like, where's your head at? Like, why are you so butthurt right now? And just the recognition that you're not what you're going through. You don't have to like act on every thought that you get. That's what meditation, I think, gives you. You can step back from your thought process and discern, is this thought even serving me or not?
Yeah, it's a way of building a bit of separation.
Totally.
Like, why am I doing this? What's going on right now? We haven't touched on your new book, Ambitious Heroes and Heartache. Do you have anything to say about that? What's it about? What's the pitch?
Yeah, the 2 second thing is, it's not going to be 2 seconds, but the short answer is that I think in life we get a lot of narratives given to us about what it means to be here and how you are successful here and what you have to do to be successful. And we form all of these models of reality in order to make ourselves comfortable and safe and successful. And then we get there and sometimes we just ask ourselves, like, is this really it? Like, the happy ending is like never the end of the story like it is in movies. And so then how do you deal with how you're actually feeling when you arrive somewhere and it's not what you thought it was going to be? And that's the underlying sort of thesis in the book. And the way that I break that down is through what's called the hero's journey. And so the hero's journey is like the underlying structure in every story. We actually talked about it a little bit at the beginning, where you said, you get the call. This always happens. The hero gets the call, and then there's a denial of the call. And so before they head on the adventure, there's always a denial of the call. And so what I did is I took that hero's journey and realized that it could be applied to your psyche. It could be a way of managing your psychological wellness. And so that's the way that I lay the book out and sort of drive at these points.
Yeah. And so you do that from your own individual growth perspective?
Yep. I researched a lot. So there's a lot of psychology in the book, like psychological principles, I would say, are used in the book. And then those are backed up with like anecdotes and stories from my own life. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good, man. Yeah. And what's next for you? Like, what's the next edge, or what's the next soul call, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I'll always be writing books. To some degree, unfortunately, just feels like the sword I picked up, But I also am kind of in line with what we've been talking about here with the Special Forces experience. I've been designing a course called The Art of Adversity, which takes a whole bunch of coaches, and not just myself, but other cadre from this company. And we've created like an immersive experience. So it's like a 6-week on-ramp, 5-day in-person retreat, and then a 6-week integration phase. And it's all built around the principles of post-traumatic growth. So how do you go into adverse situations and actually learn from them, grow from them, make them work for you instead of becoming a victim to them your entire life? Obviously, something that I've had a lot of experience with in the military. And so, I'm super excited about like democratizing these tools and making them available to people, because the VA system and the talk therapy and a lot of these things are just not, these things work until they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
Well, Rick, thanks so much for sharing an hour of your life with me and doing what you do, man. I think it's inspiring and important. And I'm glad you've chosen this path, as rambling and wandering as it's been, man.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Fun, right? That story about crawling through the forest of Kenya for hours towards an airplane crash? What the heck? That was Rick Alexander. You can find him on Instagram. He also has a podcast called Morning Coffee with Rick Alexander. I'll include links to all of that stuff in the show notes. You can check out his book as well, Ambitious Heroes and Heartache. Yeah, a good dude. I'm glad you listened to it, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you for the support. You can find me on the internet at Long Distance Love Bombs. I've got a book. I got an Instagram, and I'm happy you're here. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for the 5-star reviews. Thanks for the messages of support. Thanks for sharing this with your community, with your loved ones. It does make a difference, and I really do sincerely appreciate you.